开始。那你最讨厌的国呢？
就是美国和日本。
这么讨厌啊？为什么呢？
我是好还是坏的，我都可。
中华要灭亡，无奈先死绝。上马扎尼，战斗指示，敌不打开加战，后方以强大的火力，与南方对峙。上马扎尼。
那你长大了想干什么呢？
想杀日本人，想杀美国人。有一回我恨得流鼻血。
Something very, very, very scary is going down in China right now, and I can't for the life of me figure out why nobody in the West is talking about this. Why is nobody talking about the fact that on a mass scale, China, under the current leadership of Xi Jinping, taking on this big nationalist approach, is training its kids for war? Now, if you don't know me, I'm a guy that lived in China for 10 years. In those 10 years, I watched China go from this curious country that wanted to welcome people to a country that was taught by its leadership to start hating the rest of the world. We're not going to participate on the international stage anymore unless people play by our rules. That was kind of the new playbook that was introduced by current leader Xi Jinping. Unfortunately, the side effects of this nationalist campaign was to start blaming the rest of the world for all of China's problems. So if anything domestically bad was happening in China, it was America's fault, or Japan's fault, or Canada's fault. Nothing can be the fault of the leadership in China because that's the way authoritarian countries work. But the most important thing is to find out where this is stemming from. Unfortunately, this pride in China has turned from being proud of China to becoming very, very scary.
请用一句话证明你是中国人。
我们生在红旗下，长在春风里。
Is now not only become fashionable, but very, very acceptable and encouraged to promote nationalism under the leadership of the Communist Party of China across schools, bringing back those really, really bad, terrible songs from the past under Mao's time when people starved to death.
是中国。
你最喜欢的国家吗？那你最讨厌的国呢？
就是美国和日本。
这么讨厌啊？为什么呢？
因为他们元朝我知道，南京大屠杀我当然也知道，我都会历史。
这么厉害？那你长大了想干什么呢？
想杀日本人，想杀美国人。
Can you imagine teaching hatred to children at this age under the guise of patriotism or national pride, to go around teaching children at government schools, government-run schools, this is not some weird fringe private school institution, on a national level, to hate and want to kill people of other countries, indiscriminately, might I add. There are two faces to China that I've seen. There are two faces that nobody wants to talk about because either they're too scared or they think it's not politically correct or something, or that other countries should just be able to do their own thing. But I think this is where it crosses the line.
出门之前把脚擦一下，擦干净，脚底太脏了。
When this kind of behavior is tolerated, where they could just chuck an American flag on the ground and make viral videos about wiping their shoes on it, this is the kind of flavor in the air.
外国人，我们不喜欢外国人。
I'm not saying that everyone is like this in China, but when your mom and dad do things like this, what do you think is happening at home? What do you think thoughts are going into these children's heads? And then when they go to school and have that reinforced by their teacher, people that they look up to, it's not just shitty parenting at that point. It becomes what children believe. When I was in China, I watched children be indoctrinated from such a young age. Now, before we get into some more evidence of how scary this has become, I want you to understand this two-face thing I keep talking about. China has two faces, one that it shows the world and one that it shows itself. The image that it shows its own people is a strong military power ready to take on the world, and you need to be a cog in that machine so that you can fight off the enemy. The rest of the world has shown a peaceful image of China. It's called China's peaceful rise. The idea that China is developing peacefully and just wants to become a wealthy, developed country and not get in anyone's way. In fact, it's part of their brand to say that they don't get involved in other countries' affairs. We're in a situation now where it's become fashionable to send your kids to war training camps, to make them little soldiers, to discipline them and teach them that the world is their enemy and they must do everything in their power to become strong enough to defeat that enemy. It's one thing to use some sort of military training to teach discipline to children, and that's a different thing in itself. It's another thing to bring rampant Nazi-like nationalism and fascism to these children to teach them that the rest of the world's trying to kill them. Military training's always been a part of Chinese culture, even from way back in the day. But it's always been taught that it's just a way of kind of improving their drive to want to study harder, use basic skills like how to operate a rifle and things like this. It crosses the line when these children are indoctrinated in the classroom to start to look at people as non-humans and to start to learn that the Han Chinese race is superior to other races and has evolved differently from other races. You can see it with the teachings of the Peking man. It is taught in China that Chinese people have evolved differently than other human beings. This basic form of education spirals out of control very quickly when the children are being taught that they're superior to other races around the world. Look at the emotion on this child's face as they're drilled over and over again to learn how to scream. Because basically that's what this is. How to find enough hatred in their heart to absolutely scream at the top of their lungs, and then finally they're able to pass. These shows and this kind of military instruction has just become so popular in China for a very specific reason. And that's because it's become cool to become a nationalist. Patriotism is not nationalism. Patriotism is a love and respect for your country. Nationalism is to believe that you're better than others. And that is not what we teach our children. Jesus, I feel like I'm never going to play video games again after that. I've been brainwashed by the snake tongue salesman over here. Now, crazily enough, this goes beyond just teaching kids to quit video games in favor of fighting for their country. This goes even further into incorporating video games. Because I kid you not, remember that Xi Jinping thought ideology I told you about? It's transforming into these kiosks around China to where people can kind of immerse themselves in these 3D VR experiences, which look like absolute crap, by the way, to study Xi Jinping ideology. This all started with Xi Jinping thought. And Xi Jinping thought was this idea that we can be proud of our heritage as Chinese people, but at the same time, we need to use our current leader, our Xi Jinping, our godlike figure, as textbook curriculum. So now the curriculum around China is to use his thoughts, to use his ideas, his utopian ideology for China, and to cut China off from the rest of the world. And this is part and parcel part of the reason this kind of military conflict stuff is being taught right now. Here's an example of what happens when you let this nationalism get out of control. These kids are saying, bomb the Japanese, bomb the Jap bastards. Recently, these camps have been springing up where they're teaching kids how to bayonet people to death. Literal straw man soldiers. And military situations where there's 4- and 5-year-olds being taught how to hate and kill. How to dive on a grenade to save your comrades. This is not what little kids do in kindergarten. These are kindergartners. These are 6- and 7-year-olds too. They're tramping through mud and being screamed at by drill sergeants, being told that to be a strong Chinese person and to save their country from the evil Americans, that they need these skills. They need to go crawl through mud with knives in their mouth. They need to go and fight and shoot and kill in order to save their own country. And this is not the face of China that you're seeing. This is not the face that they want you to see. In fact, China is very, very upset with me for showing you these clips. These are not meant for intimidation. Look at these innocent faces. This is meant to scare other people into getting their children involved and to scare other schools in China to make sure that they are participating in this, because they will be left behind in Xi Jinping's China if they are not ready for war and not ready for battle. These kids have to learn this stuff because their leader is so proud and so arrogant that he believes that as a new emperor of China, that his country will be the one to take back Taiwan and to face down the US. This is the sentiment going around China, and the children are the ones that bear the brunt of that force, that bear the brunt of that arrogance. China doesn't want you to see these clips for a very specific reason, because it's brainwashing, it's ugly, but it's the truth. And I don't care if people don't want to cover this. The fact that this is happening on such a wide scale is something that needs to be talked about in the West. And the solution is not to send your kids to military camp to get ready for future conflict. The solution is to realize that there's a country on the other side of the world that's training their children from day one to hate and kill you. And I'm speaking to you as a person of the greater world. I'm speaking to you as a person. It doesn't matter your race or ethnicity or wherever you're from. China treats the rest of the world as its enemy, and companies and people are falling for this idea that China has some sort of peaceful development and wants nothing but good for the rest of the world because they buy into the propaganda. China's an authoritarian power. China is a country with a one-party state. And in this one-party state, there is one narrative from the top, and it's from Xi Jinping's government. You must follow, and you must only report on those things that are allowed. You can understand how this sends a conflicting message, because the propaganda department's only job is to make sure that you, as a person in the rest of the world, is still investing in China, still thinking of China in a positive light, and still treating China as an equal partner in this world, while at the same time, they're teaching their people the exact opposite. You don't train kindergartners in a play to fight against Japanese people and stab people. That's just not what you do. Yet, that is what they're doing on a mass scale. The nationalism that is spreading around China right at this very moment is not meant for you to see. It's not for you. And when people bring it up, China gets really, really mad. They go after people like me. They go after the Chinese abroad that try to spread this message. China's trying to silence voices who are showing you the truth, who are showing you what is actually happening in China at this very moment. China is on a very, very dark path, and this is just a tiny, tiny glimpse into what is happening. They are gearing up for something very, very bad. Whether that's the invasion of Taiwan or potential global conflict in the future, they want to make sure that their people, even the most innocent, the most vulnerable people at the bottom, the children, are ready ideologically to lay down their lives for their country in an unnecessary conflict. Because it doesn't have to be like this. You don't dress up kids and get them ready to kill people. That's just not what you do. This is not Hitler's Germany. We're not in World War II times here. This is not how civilized countries act anymore. But it's very important that we understand that this is how China is acting at the current moment. We can't ignore it. We can't turn our heads and pretend like it's not there. There is something boiling up, and it's almost reached the surface. This is Chinese schools at this very moment.
我们来上学呀。我为了长大不想在中国住了，想要去英国。
Now, as funny as this statement is, because this kid just told the truth, the sentiment on the ground is that a lot of Chinese people don't want to be part of this nationalist system. There are not stupid people roaming around everywhere. There are a lot of people that understand that this has gone too far. And this little boy obviously learned at home that he wants to go to school so he can leave China someday. Do you know what happened to this kid? Both his parents and the school or visited by authorities, punished and investigated for teaching him wrong think. And I kid you not, that's actually what happened. Now I want to leave you guys with a very heartbreaking interview with a couple children in China that's very candid, that I think tells the truth of what is being taught in schools. And I think a glimpse into this will kind of set you on the right path to understand the path that China is going on right now.
想当科学家啊？什么样的科学家呀？
就是做坦克什么的。
为什么要研究武器？
研究武器打日本人。
什么是日本人呢？
就是日本鬼子。以前日本鬼子从我们的商店偷手表，还打我们。
什么时候的事？
以前。
以前是什么时候？知道吗？
古代呗。
那你恨不恨日本人？
恨。
所有的人都恨。
对，不管是好人还是坏人，我都恨。凡是打了我们的人，我就恨。有一回我恨得流鼻血。
真的？那是什么时候啊？
好像是我4岁时候。
是恨日本人呐？你见过没见过日本人？
没有见过。
那怎么会恨成这个样子呢？
可是他因为原来在这里来做坏事啊，好像。
其实日本的也有很多孩子，也有很多女人。
都恨，只要是打我们的人，我就恨。
你恨了你以后，那你长大以后会怎么样呢？对你恨的人，你会有采取什么行动？
打别人噻。
I hope this was a sobering glimpse into what China is doing right now. I don't think it serves any positive purpose to ignore what's happening in China, because China is the second biggest economy in the world. They are one of the largest militaries in the world. They are an emerging power in this current craziness that the world is going through. And I think if we ignore that, then we are setting ourselves up for disaster, because this kind of behavior can't go unchecked. China needs to behave itself at a state level. This is not okay. Teaching children to go into life like this in 2023 is not okay. It's not appropriate. And it's very telling for where the world is headed right now.